Rain hammered the cracked asphalt outside Riverside Cafe as Emma Holloway watched her ex-husband's reflection appear in the window behind her. 6 months of hiding, 6 months of careful new routines, all destroyed in the time it took him to cross the street. Gavin Mercer smiled that same charming smile everyone always believed, grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave marks, and promised he'd drag her back home where she belonged. But before Emma could scream, a stranger's voice cut through the storm like a blade. Cold, controlled, dangerous. And a man in a charcoal suit rose from a corner booth with ice-blue eyes that made even Gavin freeze. Lucent Vale, billionaire CEO and rumored ghost of the underworld, stepped between them and spoke Gavin's full name, his mother's maiden name, the offshore accounts he thought were hidden, and handed him a business card that drained every ounce of color from his face. Emma realized in that moment she'd just been saved by someone far more terrifying than the monster she'd been running from. If you want to know whether Emma escapes her past or falls into something even darker, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The coffee shop smelled like burnt espresso and wet cardboard. Emma Holloway had been wiping down the same table for 3 minutes, staring through the rain-streaked window at absolutely nothing, when she felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She knew that feeling. She'd spent 6 months learning to trust it. Her hand stilled on the rag. The cafe was nearly empty. Just 2 college kids hunched over laptops in the corner and an older man reading a newspaper by the door. The espresso machine hissed. Rain pounded the glass. Everything looked normal. But Emma's pulse was already climbing. She turned slowly, casually, like she was just checking the time on the wall clock. That's when she saw him. Gavin, standing outside under the awning across the street, perfectly still, staring directly at her through the downpour. The rag slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. He smiled. That same warm, charming smile that had fooled her parents, her friends, the police officers who'd shrugged off her bruises. The smile that said, "I love you," right before his fist went through the drywall next to her head. Emma's throat closed up. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Gavin stepped off the curb and started across the street. Her body kicked into autopilot. She grabbed her jacket from the hook, her keys from her pocket, didn't even bother clocking out. She shoved through the back door into the alley, rain immediately soaking through her shirt, and ran. Her sneakers splashed through puddles. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Away from him. Away from the past that was supposed to stay buried in another state under another name. She made it 2 blocks before she realized he was following. Not running, just walking, calm, confident, like he knew she had nowhere to go. Emma ducked into a narrow side street, her shoulder slamming into a brick wall as she stumbled, her vision blurred with rain and panic. She pressed herself against the cold stone and tried to think. Tried to remember the escape plan she'd rehearsed 100 times in her head, but her mind was blank, just white noise and terror. Footsteps echoed behind her. "Emma." His voice was soft, almost kind. She squeezed her eyes shut. "I know you can hear me, sweetheart." Her stomach twisted. She pressed harder against the wall, like she could disappear into the brick if she just tried hard enough. "You really thought you could run from me?" Gavin's voice was closer now, just around the corner. "You really thought changing your name and moving to some nowhere town would be enough?" Emma's hand fumbled in her jacket pocket for her phone. Her fingers were shaking so hard she could barely grip it. "I've been watching you for 3 weeks, Gavin continued, his footsteps slow and deliberate. "I know you work at that shitty coffee shop. I know you live in that sad little apartment above the hardware store. I know you walk home alone every night at 9:30. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the wet pavement. "I know everything, Emma," she bolted. She didn't think, just ran, her legs pumping as hard as they could carry her. She burst out of the alley onto Main Street, nearly colliding with a woman walking a dog. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the sidewalk into a blur of gray. She didn't see Gavin's hand until it closed around her wrist like a vice. He yanked her backwards so hard she gasped. Her shoulder screamed in protest. She tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened, his fingers digging into the same spot he'd bruised 1,000 times before. "Let go of me. We're going home." His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "You've had your little adventure. It's over now. I'm not going anywhere with you. His other hand came up to her face, not quite touching, just hovering there like a threat. Don't make a scene, Emma. You know how this ends. She did know. She'd seen it end that way 20 times. Her fighting back. Him hurting her worse. Her apologizing. Him forgiving her. The cycle starting over. But something was different this time. Maybe it was 6 months of freedom. Maybe it was the rain washing away the last of her fear. Maybe she just finally hit the limit of how much terror one person could hold. Emma looked him straight in the eye and said, "Go to hell." Gavin's expression didn't change, but his grip tightened until she felt bones grinding together. Wrong answer. Let her go. The voice came from behind them, low, controlled, and completely devoid of emotion. Both Emma and Gavin turned. A man stood about 10 feet away, half hidden under the awning of a closed bookstore. Tall, mid-30s, wearing an expensive charcoal suit that somehow looked perfectly pressed despite the rain. His dark hair was slicked back, his face was all sharp angles, and his eyes were the coldest shade of blue Emma had ever seen. He looked at Gavin the way someone might look at a cockroach. Gavin's hand loosened slightly on Emma's wrist. "This doesn't concern you." "I'm making it concern me." Gavin's jaw tightened. He straightened up, puffing out his chest the way he always did when he felt threatened. "Listen, buddy, I don't know who you think you are." Gavin Mercer." The stranger's voice was flat, clinical. Born August 14th, 1987. Mother's maiden name, Patterson. Graduated from Penn Law, bottom third of your class. Currently employed at Mercer & Associates in Philadelphia, where you specialize in corporate liability defense. You have 2 DU is that your father made disappear. You're 3 months behind on your BMW lease. And you have an offshore account in the Caymans holding approximately $2.3 million that the IRS doesn't know about. The color drained from Gavin's face. Emma stared at the stranger, her heart pounding for an entirely different reason now. Gavin's grip on her wrist went slack. "Who the hell are you?" The man reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a black business card. He held it out between 2 fingers. Gavin snatched it, his hand shaking slightly. Emma watched his expression change as he read whatever was printed there, watched the arrogance melt into confusion, then into something that looked a lot like fear. "You can't be serious," Gavin whispered. "I suggest you walk away," the stranger said. "Right now, while you still can." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Gavin looked at Emma, his eyes flickering with something ugly and desperate. "This isn't over." "Yes," the stranger said quietly. "It is." Gavin's face twisted. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, wanted to push back, wanted to assert the control he'd always relied on. But whatever he saw in the stranger's expression made him think better of it. He turned and walked away. Emma stood frozen on the sidewalk, rain pouring down her face, watching Gavin disappear around the corner. Her wrist throbbed where he'd grabbed her. Her heart was still racing. Her brain was trying to process what had just happened and failing completely. The stranger stepped closer, his shoes silent on the wet pavement. "Are you hurt?" His voice was different now, still controlled, but softer somehow. Emma looked down at her wrist. Red marks were already blooming into bruises. "I'm fine." "You're not." She finally looked up at him properly. Up close, he was even more striking. Not handsome in a conventional way, but magnetic. The kind of face that looked like it had seen too much and forgotten how to be surprised by any of it. "Who are you?" Emma asked. "Lucien Vale." The name hit her like cold water. She'd heard it before. Everyone had. Lucien Vale, the billionaire CEO who'd built a tech empire from nothing before he was 30. Lucien Vale, whose name appeared in Forbes articles and Wall Street gossip columns. Lucien Vale, who had rumors swirling around him like smoke. Stories about politicians who crossed him and mysteriously lost elections. About businessmen who challenged him and ended up bankrupt. About people who threatened him and simply disappeared. "You're staring," Lucien said. Emma blinked. "Sorry, why did you help me?" "I don't like bullies." "That's it?" His ice blue eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. "That's it." She didn't believe him, but she also didn't know what else to say. Lucien reached into his jacket again and pulled out a different card. This one white, with a phone number printed in simple black text. No name, no logo, just numbers. If he comes back, Lucien said, holding it out, call me. Emma stared at the card like it might explode. I don't need. Yes, you do. There was something in his tone that made her take it. Her fingers were still shaking as she tucked it into her pocket. Lucien stepped back, his expression unreadable. Get somewhere safe, Emma. He turned and walked away before she could ask how he knew her name. Quote. Emma's apartment was a tiny studio above Miller's hardware store on 4th Street. It smelled like sawdust and old paint. The walls were thin enough that she could hear Mrs. Chen's television through the floor. The heating barely worked. The lock on the door was cheap, but it was hers, or at least it had been. Now, standing in the dark with her back pressed against the door, Emma felt like even this small piece of safety had been ripped away. Gavin knew where she lived. He'd been watching her for 3 weeks. 3 weeks? How many times had he stood outside her building? How many times had he followed her to work? How many times had he been close enough to touch her and she'd never even known? Her hands were still shaking. She crossed to the small kitchenette and poured herself a glass of water, spilling half of it on the counter. She stared at her reflection in the dark window, soaking wet, pale, eyes too wide. She looked terrified. She hated it. Emma pulled the white card from her pocket and set it on the counter. Just a phone number, nothing else. If he comes back, call me. She should throw it away. She should call the police. She should pack a bag and run again. New city, new name, new life. Except she was tired. So goddamn tired. Tired of running. Tired of hiding. Tired of looking over her shoulder every second of every day. Tired of being afraid of a man who'd already taken 5 years of her life. Emma picked up the card again and stared at the numbers. Lucien Vale was dangerous. She didn't need rumors or Forbes articles to tell her that. She'd seen it in his eyes. The kind of cold, controlled danger that didn't make threats because it didn't need to. But for the first time in 6 months, Gavin had backed down. Not because of her, because of him. Emma tucked the card back into her pocket and climbed into bed with her clothes still on. She didn't sleep. The next morning, Emma called in sick to work. She spent the day sitting on her bed, staring at the wall, replaying the scene on the street over and over in her mind. Gavin's hand on her wrist, his voice promising that it wasn't over. Lucien's expression when he'd recited Gavin's entire life like he was reading a grocery list. You have an offshore account in the Caymans holding approximately $2.3 million that the IRS doesn't know about. How did he know that? How did he know any of it? Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Emma grabbed it, her heart lurching. But it wasn't Gavin. It was her boss, Karen, asking if she was okay. She typed back a quick lie about food poisoning and set the phone aside. 3 hours later, it buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number. Emma stared at the screen, her pulse climbing. She answered. Hello? Emma Holloway. Lucien's voice was unmistakable. We need to talk. Her throat went dry. How did you get this number? Does it matter? She wanted to say yes, wanted to tell him to leave her alone, wanted to hang up and pretend yesterday never happened. But instead she said, What do you want? Dinner. Emma blinked. What? There's a restaurant on 5th and Oak, Marcel's, 7 o'clock tonight. I'll have a table reserved under my name. I'm not. Gavin filed a missing persons report this morning, Lucien continued, his tone completely neutral. He's claiming you're mentally unstable and in danger. He's already contacted 3 local police departments and hired a private investigator. Emma's stomach dropped. He's also applied for an emergency protective order on the grounds that you're a threat to yourself, Lucien added. It'll be denied, but the process will tie you up in court for weeks. He's building a legal case to force you back. She couldn't breathe. 7 o'clock, Lucien said. Don't be late. The line went dead. Emma sat frozen on the bed, the phone still pressed to her ear. Gavin was doing exactly what she knew he'd do, twisting the system to make her look crazy, using his connections and his law degree to trap her. She'd watched him do it before, watched him charm judges and police officers, watched him smile and lie and win every single time. But Lucien had just recited Gavin's secrets like he'd memorized them. which meant he had access to things even Gavin thought were hidden. Emma looked at the clock. It was 3:30. She had 3.5 hours to decide whether she was about to make the smartest decision of her life or the worst one. Marcel's was the kind of restaurant Emma had only ever walked past, the kind with cloth napkins and a wine list longer than most novels. She stood outside at 6:58, wearing the only dress she owned that didn't have coffee stains on it, trying to convince herself to turn around. But Gavin's face kept flashing through her mind. This isn't over. She pushed through the door. The hostess looked up with a polite smile. Good evening. Do you have a reservation? Lucien Vale. The smile widened. Of course. Right this way. Emma followed her through the dimly lit restaurant, past tables filled with couples in expensive clothes and businessmen in tailored suits. Everyone looked like they belonged. She didn't. The hostess stopped at a corner booth near the back. Lucien was already there, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than Emma's car. He stood as she approached. Emma? Mr. Vale? Lucien. She slid into the booth across from him, her heart pounding. A waiter appeared immediately, pouring water into crystal glasses. Can I start you with drinks? Scotch, Lucien said. Neat. I'll have water, Emma said quickly. The waiter nodded and disappeared. Silence stretched between them. Lucien's ice-blue eyes studied her face the same way they had yesterday, intense, calculating, like he was reading something written in a language only he understood. You look nervous, he said finally. I am nervous. Why? Emma almost laughed. You scared my ex-husband into running away just by handing him a business card. You know everything about him, including financial crimes. And you somehow got my phone number even though I never gave it to you. Why wouldn't I be nervous? Fair point. The waiter returned with Lucien's scotch. Are you ready to order, or would you like a few minutes? We'll need a few minutes, Lucien said without looking at him. The waiter left. Lucien took a sip of his drink, his expression never changing. Gavin Mercer is a predator. He uses his education and his family's money to manipulate systems designed to protect people like you. He's done it before, and he'll keep doing it until someone stops him. Emma's hands clenched in her lap. And you're going to stop him? Yes. Why? I already told you. I don't like bullies. That's not a reason, Emma said, her voice sharper than she intended. Nobody helps a stranger for free, especially not someone like you. Lucien's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Someone like me. You know what I mean? I do. He set his glass down. You're right. Nobody helps for free, so let me be clear about what I want. Emma's stomach twisted. I want you to let me protect you, Lucien said. I want you to trust me enough to follow my instructions when Gavin inevitably escalates. And in exchange, I will make sure he never touches you again. That's it? That's it. She didn't believe him, but she also didn't have any better options. What do your instructions look like? Emma asked carefully. Security detail, new locks on your apartment, a panic button, check-ins twice a day. Limited public appearances until Gavin's legal maneuvers are dealt with. It sounded reasonable. It also sounded like a cage. I left one controlling man, Emma said quietly. I'm not going to hand myself over to another one. Lucien's expression shifted, just barely, but enough that she noticed. You think I'm trying to control you, aren't you? No. His voice was colder now, flatter. I'm trying to keep you alive. The words hung in the air between them. Emma's pulse hammered in her throat. He's really that dangerous? He tracked you across state lines, created a false identity to avoid restraining orders, and filed legal paperwork designed to systematically trap you. Yes, Emma, he's that dangerous. She already knew that. She'd known it for years, but hearing someone else say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Okay, Emma said. What do I need to do? Over the next 2 weeks, Emma's life transformed in ways she couldn't have predicted. Lucien was true to his word. Security appeared overnight. 2 men in dark suits stationed themselves outside her building. New locks were installed on her door. A small black device that looked like a car key fob was delivered with instructions to press the button if she felt unsafe. But Lucien didn't control her. He didn't tell her where she could go or who she could see. He didn't demand her time or her attention. He simply existed on the periphery of her life like a shadow she couldn't shake. And somehow, that made everything worse, because Emma started looking for him. She'd catch herself scanning coffee shops and grocery stores, wondering if he was there. She'd see a black car idling on the corner, and her heart would stutter. She'd lie awake at night thinking about ice blue eyes and the way his voice had gone cold when he'd said, "I'm trying to keep you alive." It was stupid, dangerous, exactly the kind of thinking that had gotten her trapped before. But Gavin hadn't come back. Not once. For the first time in 6 months, Emma felt like she could breathe. Then Lucien called again. "How are you holding up?" His voice was the same as always, controlled, precise, completely unreadable. "I'm fine." "You're lying." Emma closed her eyes. She was standing in her apartment, staring out the window at the street below. "What do you want, Lucien?" "Dinner. Tomorrow night. Same place." "Why?" "Because I want to see you." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She should say no. Should keep her distance. Should remember that men like Lucien Vale didn't do anything without a reason. "Okay," Emma said. The second dinner was different. Lucien was waiting in the same corner booth, but this time there was no talk of security details or legal threats. This time, he asked her about the coffee shop, about the books she liked to read, about whether she'd always wanted to live in Pennsylvania or if it was just a place to hide. Emma found herself answering, found herself asking questions in return, and slowly, carefully, she started to see the man beneath the reputation. Lucien wasn't warm, he wasn't gentle, but he listened in a way that made her feel like every word mattered. He didn't try to fix her or save her. He just existed across the table, offering something she hadn't felt in years. Safety. Not the kind that came from locks and bodyguards, the kind that came from being seen. "You're staring," Lucien said, echoing the words from their first meeting. Emma blinked. "Sorry." "Don't apologize." His ice blue eyes held hers. "I like it when you look at me." Her breath caught. "Emma." His voice dropped lower. "I need to tell you something." Her heart stuttered. "Okay." "I know what it's like to watch someone you love be destroyed by a man who thinks power makes him untouchable." The words hit her like a fist to the chest. "My mother," Lucien continued, his expression carved from stone. "She was married to a man who used his money and influence to hurt her. Every time she tried to leave, he found her. Every time she went to the police, he made the charges disappear. And when she finally worked up the courage to fight back..." He stopped. Emma's throat tightened. "Lucien." "He killed her." His voice was completely flat. "Made it look like an accident. Walked away clean." The restaurant blurred around the edges. "I was 17, Lucien said. I spent the next 15 years making sure men like him don't get to walk away clean anymore." Emma's hands were shaking. "Is that what you do? You destroy them?" "Yes." "How?" "However I need to." She should be horrified, should stand up and walk away and never look back. But instead she reached across the table and took his hand. Lucien's eyes widened, just barely, but enough. "Thank you," Emma said quietly, "for telling me." His fingers closed around hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, Lucien Vale looked almost human. 3 days later, Emma was closing the coffee shop when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. "Hello?" "Emma." Gavin's voice slithered through the speaker. "We need to talk." Her blood turned to ice. "I know you're with him," Gavin continued, his tone eerily calm. "Lucien Vale. I know he's been following you around, playing the hero. But you need to understand something." Emma's hand tightened on the phone. "Men like him don't protect women," Gavin said. "They collect them. And once he's done playing savior, he'll do exactly what I did." "You don't know anything about him," Gavin laughed. "I know everything about him, sweetheart. I've been doing my research. Did he tell you about the people who've disappeared after crossing him? Did he mention the lawsuits that mysteriously vanish? Did he tell you what he really does when the doors close and the cameras turn off?" Emma's pulse was roaring in her ears. "He's worse than me," Gavin whispered, "and you walked right into his arms." The line went dead. Emma stood frozen in the empty coffee shop, her reflection staring back at her from the dark window. She should call Lucy. Should press the panic button, should do exactly what she'd been told. But Gavin's words kept echoing in her head. Men like him don't protect women, they collect them. Was she about to escape one cage just to walk into another? Or was she finally learning what it felt like to be safe? Emma pulled out her phone and stared at Lucian's number for a long time. Then she made her choice. Emma's finger hovered over Lucian's name for 3 full minutes before she pressed call. He answered on the first ring. What happened? Not a question. Command. Emma's throat felt like sandpaper. Gavin called me from a number I didn't recognize. Silence on the other end. The kind of silence that felt like a storm building just out of sight. What did he say? Lucian's voice was deadly calm. He said you're worse than him. The words came out in a rush. He said men like you don't protect women. You collect them. He said he's been researching you and that I walked right into... Where are you? The coffee shop. I'm closing up. Lock the door. Don't leave. I'll be there in 4 minutes. The line went dead. Emma stood in the empty cafe, surrounded by overturned chairs and the smell of stale coffee grounds. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She crossed to the front door and twisted the lock, then backed away like the glass might shatter if she got too close. 4 minutes felt like 4 hours. When headlights finally swept across the window, Emma's entire body went rigid. But it was Lucien's black sedan, not Gavin's BMW. She watched him climb out, his movements precise and controlled, even though he'd probably broken 6 traffic laws getting here. She unlocked the door. Lucian stepped inside and immediately scanned the entire space, the corners, the back room, the windows, like he was cataloging every possible threat. Then his eyes locked on her face. Did he threaten you directly? No, he wanted me to doubt you. And do you? The question hung in the air between them. Emma looked at him. Really looked at him. Lucian Vale in his perfectly tailored suit, ice blue eyes that had probably watched terrible things without flinching, hands that were steady when hers were still trembling. I don't know, she said honestly. Something flickered across his face. Not anger, something worse. Hurt. It was gone in a second, replaced by that familiar mask of control. But Emma had seen it. Smart, Lucian said quietly. You shouldn't trust me. Then why am I here? Because the alternative is worse. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Gavin's right about one thing. I'm dangerous. I've done things that would make you run if you knew the details. But I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. And what are you? A man who destroys people who deserve it. How do you decide who deserves it? Lucian's jaw tightened. Men who beat women. Men who use money and power to trap people weaker than them. Men like your ex-husband. Men like your mother's husband. His eyes went cold. Yes. Emma took a shaky breath. Gavin said people disappear after crossing you. They do. Where do they go? Prison, mostly. Bankruptcy. Exile. Wherever their crimes take them, once the evidence I've collected reaches the right people. Lucian's voice was flat, clinical. I don't kill people, Emma. I ruin them. Legally. Permanently. That's supposed to make me feel better? No. He moved closer still, close enough that she could smell expensive cologne and rain. But it's the truth, which is more than Gavin ever gave you. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that truth didn't matter if the man speaking it was just another monster in a nicer suit. But her body wouldn't cooperate. Because standing 3 feet from Lucian Vale, Emma didn't feel trapped. She felt safe, and that terrified her more than anything Gavin had said. I'm not going to cage you, Lucian said, reading her expression like he could see straight through her skull. You can walk away right now. Fire me. Tell me to leave. I'll make sure Gavin's legal harassment stops, and then I'll disappear. You'd do that? Yes. Why? His ice blue eyes held hers. Because you deserve a choice. Emma's breath caught. No one had ever said that to her before. Not her parents, who'd loved Gavin's charm and his law degree. Not her friends, who'd slowly disappeared when the bruises started showing. Not the police officers who'd suggested she was exaggerating. Never Gavin, who'd spent 5 years making sure she never had a choice about anything. But here was Lucian Vale, the most dangerous man she'd ever met, offering her a door she could walk through. "I'm not leaving," Emma said. Lucian exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath. "Okay, but I need you to promise me something." "What?" "No more secrets." Her voice was steadier now. "If you're going to protect me, I need to know what I'm walking into. All of it." For a long moment, Lucien just stared at her. Then he nodded once. "All of it." "Starting with how you know so much about Gavin." Lucien's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's the easy part. I bought his firm's primary lender 3 years ago." Emma blinked. "You what?" "Mercer & Associates has a $15 million line of credit through North Point Financial. I acquired North Point in a hostile takeover in 2023, which means I own Gavin's debt." He tilted his head. "And his financial records." That's not legal." "It's perfectly legal. Ethically questionable, maybe, but legal." Emma's head was spinning. "Why would you buy a bank just to—" "I didn't buy it for Gavin. I bought it because North Point was financing shell companies for 3 different domestic abusers using legal loopholes to hide assets from their ex-wives." Lucian's voice went colder. Gavin was just a bonus. She didn't know what to say to that. The offshore accounts, the DU the sealed court records from his college assault allegation. Lucian continued. "All of it was sitting in North Point's files waiting for someone to connect the dots. I just happened to be the one with access." "And you've been holding on to that information for 3 years?" "I've been holding on to information about hundreds of men like him." He met her eyes, waiting for the right moment to use it. Emma's stomach twisted. You're talking about blackmail." "I'm talking about leverage." "That's the same thing." "No." Lucian's voice was sharp now. "Blackmail is extortion for personal gain. What I do is collect insurance. And when men like Gavin step out of line, I make sure they face consequences the system was designed to protect them from." "You sound like a vigilante." "I'm a businessman with a very specific portfolio." Emma wanted to be horrified, wanted to feel disgust or fear or moral outrage, but all she felt was exhausted, tired of living in a world where men like Gavin got away with everything while women like her ran and hid and prayed. "Show me," Emma said suddenly. Lucian frowned. "Show you what?" "The evidence. All of it. I want to see what you have on him." "Emma, you said no more secrets, so show me." For the first time since she'd met him, Lucien looked uncertain. "Some of it isn't pleasant. I lived with him for 5 years. I know what unpleasant looks like." His jaw worked for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and held it out. Emma took it with trembling hands. The first image was a bank statement showing wire transfers to the Cayman Islands. The second was an email chain discussing the assault allegation from his college girlfriend, detailing how his father had paid her $50,000 to drop the charges. The third was security footage from a bar where Gavin had shoved a woman hard enough to knock her into a table. Emma scrolled through it all, her chest tightening with every swipe. There were dozens of documents, hundreds, maybe, phone records, credit card statements, text messages to other women that made her skin crawl, medical reports from 2 different ex-girlfriends documenting injuries. By the time she reached the end, Emma's hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone. "He did this to other people," she whispered. Lucien took the phone back gently. "Yes." "How many?" "At least 4 that I've found evidence of. Probably more." Emma's knees went weak. She grabbed the edge of the counter to steady herself. Lucien's hand came up to her elbow, not grabbing, just supporting. "Sit down." She let him guide her to one of the overturned chairs. He righted it, and she collapsed onto the seat. "Why didn't you go to the police with this?" Emma asked, her voice hollow. "I did. 2 years ago." Lucien's expression was carved from ice. "The prosecutor declined to press charges due to insufficient evidence. Apparently, financial records and witness testimony aren't enough when the accused has a law degree and a father with political connections. So you kept it?" "I kept building the case." waiting for Gavin to make a mistake big enough that no amount of connections could save him. Emma looked up at him. What kind of mistake? Lucian crouched down so they were eye level. The kind where he violates a restraining order, or commits a felony, or does something stupid enough that even his father's friends can't look the other way. He's going to do that? He already has. Filing a false police report claiming you're mentally unstable is illegal. Hiring a private investigator to stalk you across state lines is harassment. Calling you from a blocked number to threaten you is witness intimidation. But you can't prove any of that. Yes, I can. Lucien's voice was utterly calm. Because every call you've received from him has been recorded, every email forwarded, every move documented. Emma's blood ran cold. How? Your phone, the security detail, traffic cameras, Gavin's own cell records. He held her gaze. I told you I'd protect you, Emma. That means building a case strong enough to bury him. She should be angry, should feel violated that her phone had been monitored without her knowledge. But instead, all she felt was relief. Because for the first time in her life, someone was actually fighting back. What happens now? Emma asked quietly. Now we wait for Gavin to escalate, and when he does, Lucien's expression went deadly. I'll make sure he never walks free again. Over the next week, Emma learned what it meant to be protected by Lucian Vale. It meant waking up to text messages confirming she'd slept through the night. It meant walking to work with a security detail she barely noticed shadowing her from half a block away. It meant dinners that felt less like strategy sessions and more like something else. Something Emma didn't have a name for yet. They talked about everything except Gavin. Lucian told her about growing up in Boston with a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep him fed. About watching her slowly break under the weight of a man who smiled in public and destroyed her in private. About the day he'd found her body at the bottom of the stairs and the police had called it an accident without even investigating. Emma told him about the early days with Gavin, when he'd been charming and attentive and perfect. About the first time he'd grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise and then cried and apologized until she believed it would never happen again. About the slow, suffocating realization that she'd married a monster wearing a human mask. And somewhere between the 3rd dinner and the 4th, Emma stopped thinking of Lucien as her protector. She started thinking of him as something more dangerous, someone she might actually care about. It was a mistake. She knew it was a mistake, but her heart didn't seem to care. They were walking through Riverside Park at midnight, Emma's favorite time when the world felt quiet and safe. When Lucien's phone buzzed, he glanced at the screen and his entire expression changed. What? Emma asked immediately. Gavin's lawyer just filed an emergency custody petition. Emma stopped walking. What are you talking about? We don't have kids. No, but the petition claims you're pregnant with his child and planning to flee the state. Lucian's voice was ice. It's completely fabricated, but it'll force you into court to deny it under oath, which means he'll know exactly where you are and when. The park spun around her. He's baiting me, Emma whispered. Yes. He wants me to show up so he can, what, grab me in the courthouse? Probably. Lucian's jaw was tight. Or he's hoping you'll skip the hearing, at which point he'll get a default judgment and a warrant for your arrest. Emma's chest felt like it was caving in. I can't win. Yes, you can. How? Lucien looked at her with those ice blue eyes that had started to feel less cold and more protective. You show up with me, and we turn his trap into a public spectacle he can't control. What does that mean? It means we show the judge every piece of evidence I've collected, every bank record, every witness statement, every documented instance of abuse. We bury him in front of everyone. Emma's pulse hammered. You said the prosecutor wouldn't press charges. That was 2 years ago. Now Gavin's actively committing new crimes, perjury, filing false legal documents, harassment, all felonies. Lucian stepped closer. This time, they won't have a choice. You're sure? I'm sure. Emma wanted to believe him, but she'd spent 5 years learning not to trust promises. What if it doesn't work? She asked quietly. Lucien's expression softened, just barely, but enough. Then I'll do what I should have done from the beginning. Which is? Make him disappear. The words should have terrified her. Instead, Emma felt something warm uncurl in her chest. Safety. Real safety. Not the kind built from locks and bodyguards. The kind built from knowing someone would burn the world down before letting her get hurt again. Lucienne! He kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't soft. It was desperate and raw, and tasted like rain and scotch, and every unspoken thing that had been building between them since the moment he'd stepped between her and Gavin on that rainy street. Emma kissed him back without thinking, her hands fisting in his jacket, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. That was a mistake, Lucian said. I know. I shouldn't have... Shut up. Emma pulled him back down and kissed him again. This time, Lucian didn't pull away. The courthouse was a brutalist concrete building that looked like it had been designed to crush hope. Emma stood on the steps at 8:45 in the morning, wearing the only professional outfit she owned, trying not to throw up. Lucien stood beside her in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her annual rent, his expression completely unreadable. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "Yes, I do. If you walk in there, Gavin's going to see you. He's going to try to get close to you. He's going to say things designed to break you down." "I know." "Emma." She looked up at him. "I've been running for 6 months. I'm done running." Lucien's jaw tightened, but he nodded. They walked inside together. The courtroom was smaller than Emma expected. Just a judge's bench, a few rows of seats, and wood paneling that smelled like old paper and furniture polish. A handful of people were scattered around the room, most of them lawyers shuffling through files. And then she saw him. Gavin sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, a gray-haired man in an expensive suit who looked exactly like every lawyer Emma had ever seen in movies. Gavin was wearing his best suit, his hair perfectly styled, his expression carefully neutral. But when his eyes landed on Emma, his mouth curved into a smile. Emma's entire body went cold. Lucian's hand came up to the small of her back, not pulling, just grounding. "Breathe." She forced air into her lungs. They took seats at the defendant's table. Lucien opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of files thick enough to be a weapon. Gavin's lawyer leaned over and whispered something. Gavin's smile widened. Emma's hands clenched in her lap. "All rise," the bailiff called. "The Honorable Judge Patricia Moreno presiding." Everyone stood as a black woman in her 50s swept into the room and took her seat behind the bench. She looked tired and deeply unimpressed by everything. Emma liked her immediately. "Be seated." Judge Moreno adjusted her glasses and scanned the room. Case number 74298. Gavin Mercer versus Emma Holloway. Emergency custody petition. She looked up. "Before we begin, I want to note for the record that there is no child listed in these filings. No birth certificate, no hospital records, nothing. So someone better start explaining why I'm here on a Saturday morning." Gavin's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client has reason to believe Ms. Holloway is pregnant with his child and planning to flee the jurisdiction. We're asking for..." "Do you have any evidence of this alleged pregnancy?" Judge Moreno's voice was flat. "Ms. Holloway has refused to communicate with my client or submit to medical testing. So that's a no." The judge turned to Emma. "Ms. Holloway, are you pregnant?" Emma stood on shaking legs. "No, Your Honor." "Have you ever been pregnant by Mr. Mercer?" "No." Judge Moreno looked back at Gavin's lawyer. "Then this petition is frivolous and we're done here." "Your Honor, if I may..." "You may not." The judge's expression was carved from stone. "You just wasted the court's time with a baseless accusation. I'm seriously considering sanctions." "Your Honor, there's a history here that the court needs to understand." "Then present it." Gavin's lawyer hesitated. Emma could see him recalculating, trying to figure out how to spin this. Lucian stood. "Your Honor, if I may." Judge Moreno's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "Lucian Vale, legal counsel for Ms. Holloway." "You're representing her?" "For the purposes of this hearing, yes." The judge looked between them, clearly suspicious. "Go ahead, Mr. Vale." Lucien picked up the first file. "Your Honor, Mr. Mercer has a documented history of domestic violence spanning at least 7 years and 4 different victims. I have medical records, witness statements, and police reports that were never properly investigated due to Mr. Mercer's family connections. Gavin's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. This is completely irrelevant. It's directly relevant to understanding why Ms. Holloway has been avoiding contact with your client, Lucian said calmly. Mr. Mercer has been stalking her for 3 months. He hired a private investigator to track her across state lines. He filed a false missing persons report, and he submitted this fraudulent custody petition for the sole purpose of forcing her into a location where he could confront her. Judge Moreno's expression went from tired to furious. Is this true? Your Honor, my client has every right. I asked if it's true. Gavin's lawyer's mouth opened and closed. Lucian set the first file on the judge's bench. This is documentation of Mr. Mercer's financial crimes, including tax evasion and offshore accounts. This, he set down a second file, is evidence of his stalking behavior, including phone records and private investigator invoices. And this, a third file, is testimony from 3 previous romantic partners detailing patterns of abuse identical to what Ms. Holloway experienced. The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Moreno picked up the first file and started reading. Emma could see the exact moment the judge's expression shifted from skeptical to horrified. Mr. Mercer, Judge Moreno said slowly, still reading, did you file this petition knowing there was no pregnancy? Gavin stood, his charm slipping back into place like a mask. Your Honor, I had reasonable cause to believe. Answer the question. Did you know there was no pregnancy when you filed this petition? Gavin's jaw tightened. I suspected. Yes or no? The silence stretched. Yes, Gavin finally said. Judge Moreno closed the file. Mr. Mercer, you are an officer of the court. You know filing false legal documents is perjury. You know making fraudulent claims is sanctionable, and yet you did it anyway. She turned to Gavin's lawyer. And you signed off on this? The lawyer looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Your Honor, my client assured me. I don't care what your client assured you. You have a responsibility to verify claims before bringing them to this court. Judge Moreno's voice could have cut steel. Petition denied. Mr. Mercer, you are hereby ordered to stay at least 500 feet from Ms. Holloway at all times. No contact of any kind. No emails, no calls, no letters, no third-party messages. If you violate this order, you will be arrested immediately. Your Honor, Gavin started. I'm not finished. I'm also forwarding these files to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges. Perjury, filing false reports, possible witness intimidation. Judge Moreno looked at him with open disgust. You're a lawyer, Mr. Mercer. You should know better. Gavin's face went white. We're adjourned. Judge Moreno slammed her gavel and stood. The bailiff called all rise, but Emma couldn't move. Her legs felt like water. Lucian's hand found her elbow, steadying her. Breathe. She forced air into her lungs. Across the courtroom, Gavin was staring at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Pure, undiluted hatred. His lawyer was gathering files, trying to get him moving, but Gavin wouldn't budge. He just kept staring at Emma like he could set her on fire with his eyes alone. Then he smiled. It was the same smile he'd worn that night in the park. The smile that said, "This isn't over." "Emma," Lucian said quietly, "we need to go." She let him guide her out of the courtroom, down the hall, through the courthouse doors into bright morning sunlight that felt too cheerful for what had just happened. They made it halfway to the parking lot before Emma's knees gave out. Lucian caught her before she hit the pavement, his arms solid and steady around her waist. "I've got you," he said. "I've got you." Emma pressed her face against his chest and finally let herself cry. They drove to Lucien's house. Emma didn't protest. She was too tired to protest anything. The house was on the outskirts of town, a modern glass and steel structure that looked like something from an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked acres of forest. Everything inside was clean lines and expensive furniture, and the kind of quiet that only came from real isolation. Emma stood in the living room, still shaking, while Lucien disappeared into the kitchen. He came back with 2 glasses of scotch. "I don't drink," Emma said automatically. "Today you do." She took the glass. The scotch burned going down, but it helped steady her nerves. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Emma said, He's not going to stop. I know. The restraining order won't matter. The judge's threats won't matter. He's going to keep coming. Lucian's ice blue eyes were steady on hers. Let him. What? Let him break the restraining order. Let him make contact. Let him threaten you or follow you or do anything that gives me legal grounds to destroy him completely. His voice was utterly calm. We just handed the DA a roadmap for prosecution. Now we wait for Gavin to hand them the reason. Emma's hands tightened around the glass. What if he doesn't make a mistake? What if he hurts me first? He won't get the chance. You can't know that. Yes, Lucienne said quietly. I can. The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it made Emma's stomach twist, because she was starting to understand what Lucien really meant when he talked about making people disappear. If you kill him, Emma said slowly, you'll go to prison. I'm not going to kill him. Then what? Emma. Lucien set down his glass and turned to face her fully. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe that Lucien Vale, with his ice blue eyes and his files full of evidence and his terrifying calm, could actually keep her safe. But trusting men had nearly destroyed her once already. I don't know, Emma said honestly. Something flickered across Lucien's face. Not hurt this time. Understanding. Okay, he said. Then let me prove it. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Marcus, I need a team at the Riverside property tonight. Full surveillance. If Gavin Mercer comes within a mile of Emma Holloway, I want to know about it before he takes his next breath. A pause. No, I don't care what it costs. Just do it. He hung up. Emma stared at him. How much is this costing you? Does it matter? Yes. Why? Because I need to know what you're expecting in return. Lucien went very still. You think I'm doing this because I want something from you? Men always want something. I'm not Gavin. I know. Emma's voice cracked. But I don't know what you are. The words hung in the air between them. Lucien stood and crossed to the window, his back to her. For a long moment, he just stared out at the forest. Then he said, My mother used to say that some men are born broken. They look normal on the outside, but inside they're just empty. No empathy, no conscience, just hunger dressed up as love. He turned to face her. She was talking about my stepfather, but she could have been talking about me. Emma's breath caught. I'm not a good man, Emma. I've done things that would horrify you. I've ruined lives and destroyed careers and never lost a single night of sleep over it. His ice blue eyes were absolutely steady. But I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am, and I've never hurt someone who didn't deserve it. How do you decide who deserves it? I ask myself one question. Lucien's voice was quiet. If my mother were still alive, would she want this person to suffer? Emma's chest tightened. The answer for Gavin is yes, Lucien continued. So I'm going to make sure he suffers, legally, systematically, completely, and I'm not going to stop until he's broken in every way that matters. And what do you want from me? Nothing. Everyone wants something. Then I want you to be safe. Lucien stepped closer. I want you to sleep through the night without nightmares. I want you to walk down the street without looking over your shoulder. I want you to build the life you deserve without spending every second afraid it's going to be ripped away. Emma's eyes burned. Why? Because you survived something that destroys most people, and you're still standing. His voice dropped. That's not weakness, Emma. That's strength. And I'll be damned if I let Gavin take that from you. The tears finally spilled over. Lucien closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. Not demanding, just offering. Emma buried her face against his chest and let herself break completely. And Lucien held her through every sob, every tremor, every shattered piece she'd been holding together for 6 months. When she finally pulled back, her face blotchy and her eyes swollen, Lucien gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. Stay here tonight, he said quietly. It's safer than your apartment. Emma nodded. She was too tired to argue. Too tired to be afraid. Too tired to do anything except let herself be protected by a man who was either her salvation or her destruction. She just hoped she'd figure out which before it was too late. Deck. Emma woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the memories came rushing back. The courthouse. Gavin's face. Lucien's arms around her. She was lying in a massive bed in what was clearly a guest room. Someone, Lucien probably, had left a glass of water and painkillers on the nightstand. Her clothes from yesterday were folded neatly on a chair. Emma sat up slowly, her head pounding. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. Her blood turned to ice. She answered. Hello? You think you won? Gavin's voice was calm, too calm. You think your attack dog scared me off with his files and his threats and his courtroom theatrics. But you need to understand something, Emma. I know what men like Lucien Vale do to women who trust them. I've seen it before. And when he's done playing hero, you violated the restraining order, Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm recording this call. Silence. Then Gavin laughed. It was the worst sound Emma had ever heard. Record whatever you want, sweetheart. It won't matter. Because Lucien can't protect you from what's coming. Nobody can. The line went dead. Emma sat frozen on the bed, the phone still pressed to her ear. Then she heard footsteps in the hall. The door opened. Lucien stood in the doorway, his expression carved from stone. He called you. It wasn't a question. Emma nodded. What did he say? She told him. Lucien's jaw tightened with every word. When she finished, he pulled out his own phone and made a call. Marcus. Gavin Mercer just violated the restraining order. I need the recording pulled from Emma's phone and delivered to the DA's office within the hour. A pause. I don't care if it's Sunday. Wake someone up. He hung up and looked at Emma. This is good, he said. Emma laughed. A harsh, broken sound. How is this good? Because he just handed us exactly what we needed. A clear, documented violation of a court order. The DA will have to press charges now. And if they don't, then I'll handle it myself. The words should have been reassuring. Instead, Emma felt her stomach drop, because she was starting to realize that Lucien's version of handling it might be far worse than anything the legal system could do. And the truly terrifying part? She wasn't sure she cared anymore. Boutique. 3 days later, Emma was closing the coffee shop when the lights went out. Not just inside, Joe, the entire street went dark. Her heart started hammering immediately. She fumbled for her phone, pulled up Lucien's number with shaking hands. It rang once, then went dead. No signal. Emma's breath came in short, sharp gasps. She backed toward the counter, her eyes adjusting slowly to the darkness. That's when she heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. Emma grabbed a coffee pot from the warmer. It was ceramic, heavy enough to do damage, and pressed herself against the wall beside the door. The footsteps stopped right outside. The handle turned. The door opened. A figure stepped inside, backlit by moonlight. Emma raised the coffee pot. Emma! The voice was familiar. It's me. Not Gavin. Not Lucien. One of Lucien's security detail. Marcus, the man with the scar through his eyebrow who never smiled. Emma lowered the coffee pot with shaking hands. What happened? Power surge took out the entire grid. Happened simultaneously across 6 blocks. Marcus's voice was flat, professional. It's not an accident. Emma's blood ran cold. Where's Lucien? En route. He sent me to get you. Get me where? Somewhere safe. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, wanted to know what the hell was happening, but the look on Marcus's face told her everything she needed to know. Gavin was escalating, and this time he wasn't playing games. Okay, Emma whispered. Let's go. Marcus led her out through the back alley to a black SUV with tinted windows. He opened the door, and Emma climbed inside. The door locked behind her. The car started moving. Emma looked around, her pulse climbing. Where's Lucien? Handling the situation, Marcus said from the driver's seat. What situation? No answer. Emma's chest tightened. Marcus, what's going on? The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror, and Emma realized with ice-cold clarity that she'd just made a terrible mistake, because the man driving wasn't Marcus. She'd never seen him before in her life. Who are you? Emma's voice came out thin, terrified. The man smiled. A friend of Gavin's. Emma lunged for the door handle. It wouldn't open. She pounded on the window, screaming, but the glass was too thick and the street was empty. The car picked up speed, leaving the coffee shop behind, and Emma realized that Gavin had finally outmaneuvered them all. Emma's fists hammered against the window until her knuckles split and bled. The driver didn't even flinch. He just kept his eyes on the road, taking turn after turn through darkened streets that all looked the same. Her phone was dead. The door wouldn't open. The glass wouldn't break. She was trapped. Again. The word echoed in her skull like a death sentence. After everything. After Lucien. After the courthouse. After finally believing she might actually escape, she was right back where she started. Helpless. Powerless. At the mercy of a man who wanted to hurt her. Emma forced herself to breathe. Forced herself to think. The driver was taking her somewhere specific. Somewhere Gavin had planned. Which meant Gavin was waiting. Which meant she needed to be ready. She looked around the SUV, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. But the interior was stripped clean. No loose objects, no tools, nothing. Just leather seats and tinted windows and the sound of her own ragged breathing. The car turned onto an industrial road. Warehouses loomed on either side, their windows dark and broken. This was the part of town where nobody asked questions, where screams went unanswered. Emma's stomach twisted. The SUV pulled up in front of a massive brick building with rusted metal doors. The driver killed the engine and climbed out without a word. Emma's door opened. Cold night air hit her face. "Out!" the driver said. She didn't move. He grabbed her arm and yanked her from the vehicle hard enough that she stumbled. Her knees hit concrete. Pain shot up her legs. "Walk." Emma stood on shaking legs. Her mind was racing, cataloging escape routes. But there were no cars on the street, no witnesses, no help coming. The driver shoved her toward a side entrance. The metal door was already open, spilling weak yellow light across the pavement. Emma stepped inside. The warehouse was cavernous and empty except for a single chair sitting in the center of the floor under a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The walls were lined with old machinery covered in rust and dust. Everything smelled like oil and decay, and standing in the shadows near the far wall, arms crossed, was Gavin. He looked different than he had in the courthouse. The polished lawyer veneer was gone. His shirt was wrinkled. His hair was messy. His eyes had a wild, manic gleam that made Emma's skin crawl. "Emma!" He said her name like it was something sacred. "I was starting to think you wouldn't make it. Let me go." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Gavin laughed. "Let you go? After everything I went through to get you here?" He stepped into the light. "Do you have any idea how much planning this took? How many favors I had to call in? How much money I spent?" "Lucien will find me." "No, he won't." Gavin's smile was cold. "Because Lucien Vale is currently dealing with a fire at one of his warehouses on the other side of town. Very tragic, very time-consuming. By the time he realizes you're missing, we'll be long gone." Emma's heart sank. Gavin had planned this perfectly. The power outage, the fake Marcus, the decoy emergency, all of it designed to separate her from Lucien long enough to disappear. "Where are you taking me?" Emma asked. "Does it matter?" "Yes." Gavin tilted his head, studying her. "You've changed. You used to be so compliant, so eager to please. Now you look at me like I'm the monster. You are a monster." His expression darkened. "I gave you everything, a home, a life, security, and you threw it away because you couldn't handle a little discipline. You broke my ribs. You shouldn't have talked back." Emma's hands clenched into fists. "You're insane." "No." Gavin stepped closer. "I'm a man who understands how the world works. Women like you need structure, boundaries, someone to tell you what to do because you can't be trusted to make good decisions on your own. I made the decision to leave you. That was the best decision of my life." Gavin's face twisted into something ugly. "And look where it got you, hiding in a shitty apartment, working a minimum wage job, letting some billionaire psychopath play savior." He was close enough now that Emma could smell his cologne. The same expensive brand he'd always worn. It made her want to vomit. "You thought Lucien Vale was different? You thought he actually cared about you?" "He does care. He collects broken things, Emma. Damaged women who are grateful for scraps of attention. You're not special to him. You're just another project." The words hit harder than Emma wanted to admit. Because hadn't she wondered the same thing? Hadn't she lain awake at night questioning why someone like Lucien would care about someone like her? But then she remembered the way Lucien had held her while she cried, the way he'd looked at her in the courthouse, the way his voice had gone soft when he'd promised to keep her safe. "You're wrong," Emma said. Gavin's hand shot out and grabbed her jaw, forcing her to look at him. His fingers dug into her skin hard enough to bruise. "I'm never wrong about men like him. I know what they do to women who trust them. I've seen it. I've cleaned up the aftermath. Let go of me. Make me." Emma's knee came up hard and fast, slamming into Gavin's groin. He doubled over with a strangled gasp, his grip loosening. Emma ran. She made it 10 feet before the driver grabbed her from behind, his arm wrapping around her throat. Emma clawed at his forearm, gasping for air, but his grip was iron. "Bring her back," Gavin wheezed. The driver dragged Emma back to the center of the warehouse and shoved her into the chair. Her head cracked against the metal backrest. Stars exploded across her vision. When her eyes focused again, Gavin was standing over her, his face flushed with rage. "You stupid bitch!" His hand came down hard across her face. Emma's head snapped to the side. Blood filled her mouth. Her cheek throbbed. "You really thought you could fight me?" Gavin's voice was shaking. "You really thought running away and changing your name and playing house with Lucien Vale would be enough?" Emma spit blood on the floor. He's going to kill you." "No, he's not. Because by the time he finds you, you'll be mine again, and you'll tell him to stay away. You'll tell him it was all a mistake, that you never wanted his help." "I'll never do that." Gavin crouched down so they were eye level. "You will. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone you've ever cared about suffers. Your parents, your old co-workers, that barista from the coffee shop who thinks you're friends." His smile was poison. "I've spent 6 months documenting your entire life, Emma. Every connection, every relationship, every person who might miss you if you disappeared. And if you don't cooperate, I'll destroy them one by one." Emma's blood ran cold. "Now!" Gavin stood and pulled out his phone. "You're going to call Lucien Vale, and you're going to tell him you left voluntarily, that you realized he was just another controlling man and you want nothing to do with him." "No." Gavin's hand cracked across her face again, harder this time. "Wrong answer." Emma's vision blurred. Her ears rang. Blood dripped from her split lip onto her lap. "Call him," Gavin said, "or I start with your parents." Emma's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone Gavin shoved at her. She stared at the screen. Lucien's number was already pulled up. All she had to do was press call, and lie, and destroy the one person who'd ever actually tried to help her. Emma's thumb hovered over the screen. Then she heard it, a sound like thunder rolling through the building. Gavin heard it too. He spun toward the entrance, his expression shifting from triumph to confusion. The metal doors exploded inward, not slowly, not carefully. They blew off their hinges with enough force to send shrapnel flying across the warehouse floor, and through the smoke and dust stepped Lucien Vale. He looked like death itself. His suit was torn. His face was streaked with ash. His ice blue eyes were empty of everything except cold, calculated rage. Behind him came 6 men in tactical gear, all armed, all moving with military precision. Gavin's driver pulled a gun from his jacket. He didn't get a chance to raise it. One of Lucien's men put a bullet through his shoulder before he could blink. The driver screamed and dropped to his knees, clutching the wound. Gavin grabbed Emma by the hair and yanked her up from the chair, his other hand fumbling in his pocket. "Don't come any closer." Lucien stopped 10 feet away. His eyes found Emma's face, scanned the blood, the bruises, the terror. Something shifted in his expression. The last trace of humanity vanished. "Let her go." Lucien's voice was barely above a whisper. Somehow, that made it more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. "Or what?" Gavin's hand was shaking. "You'll shoot me? In front of all your witnesses? You'll go to prison." "I don't care." The words were so simple, so honest, and Emma believed them completely. "Lucien," Gavin's voice cracked, "we can work this out. I'll leave. I'll never contact her again. Just let me walk out of here." Lucien tilted his head slightly. "You hit her." "She tried to—" "You hit her." Gavin's grip on Emma's hair tightened. "I'm warning you." "No!" Lucien took a step forward. "I'm warning you. If you don't let her go in the next 3 seconds, what happens next will make prison look like mercy. You can't touch me. I'm 1. Lucien, be reasonable. 2. Emma felt Gavin's hand start to shake violently. He was realizing, too late, that he'd miscalculated. Lucien Vale wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to end this. 3. Gavin shoved Emma forward and bolted toward a side exit. He made it 5 steps. One of Lucien's men appeared in the doorway, blocking his path. Gavin skidded to a stop, spun around, and found himself surrounded. No, Gavin whispered. No, no, no. 2 men grabbed him by the arms and forced him to his knees. Lucien crossed the warehouse floor without looking at him. He went straight to Emma, his hands coming up to her face with a gentleness that completely contradicted the violence of the previous 60 seconds. Are you hurt? His voice was different now, softer, almost fragile. Emma's throat closed up. She couldn't speak, could only nod. Lucien's jaw tightened. His thumb brushed carefully over her split lip. I'm sorry, I should have seen this coming. It's not your fault. Yes, it is. His ice blue eyes were burning. I promised to keep you safe, and I let him get to you. Lucien. Emma's hands came up to grip his wrists. I'm okay. No, you're not. He was right. She wasn't okay. But she was alive. And Gavin was on his knees, surrounded by armed men, finally as powerless as he'd always made her feel. Emma looked over Lucien's shoulder at her ex-husband. Gavin was staring at them both with pure hatred etched across his face. What happens now? Emma asked quietly. Lucien's expression went cold again. He turned to face Gavin. Now I keep my promise. What promise? Gavin spat. That if you ever touched her again, there would be consequences worse than prison. Lucien pulled out his phone and held it up. On the screen was a video feed, security footage from the warehouse showing Gavin slapping Emma across the face. This footage has already been uploaded to 3 different servers. Copies have been sent to the district attorney, the State Bar Association, and every major news outlet in Pennsylvania. By tomorrow morning, your face will be on every television screen in the state. Gavin's face went white. Your law license will be revoked within 72 hours. Lucien continued, his voice clinical. The IRS has already been notified of your offshore accounts. The kidnapping charges will be filed Monday morning. And every woman you've ever hurt has been contacted by my legal team and offered pro bono representation if they want to press charges. You can't do this. I already did. I'll fight it. I'll appeal. I have connections. But your connections are gone. Lucien's smile was razor sharp. Your father's law firm just issued a press release disowning you. Your partners at Mercer and Associates voted to remove your name from the building. Your bank accounts have been frozen pending federal investigation. You have nothing left, Gavin. No money, no reputation, no future. Emma watched the realization hit him, watched Gavin's face crumble as he understood that everything he'd built his identity on was gone. You destroyed me, Gavin whispered. Yes. Why? Lucien looked at Emma. His expression softened just slightly. Because she asked me to. Emma's breath caught. She hadn't asked. But Lucien had done it anyway. For her. Take him, Lucien said to his men. They hauled Gavin to his feet. He was screaming now, cursing, threatening lawsuits and revenge, and every empty promise desperate men made when they realized they'd lost. But nobody was listening. The men dragged him out through the shattered entrance, and then he was gone. And Emma was left standing in the center of a ruined warehouse with a man who just casually destroyed another human being like it was nothing. She should be horrified, should be afraid, should be questioning everything. But all she felt was exhausted. Emma, Lucien's voice pulled her back. We need to get you to a hospital. I'm fine. You're bleeding. She looked down at herself. Blood had soaked through her shirt. Her hands were shaking. Her face throbbed. Okay, Emma said quietly. Hospital. Lucien's arm came around her waist, supporting her weight. I've got you. Emma let him guide her toward the exit, but before they reached the door, she stopped. Lucien. He turned to look at her. Thank you. Something flickered in his ice blue eyes. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. Emma, You saved my life. I almost got you killed. Emma reached up and touched his face. Her fingers came away streaked with ash and sweat. No. Gavin almost got me killed. You kept me alive. Lucian's hand covered hers. This isn't over. The trial will take months. The media coverage will be brutal. Gavin's lawyers will drag you through every humiliating detail trying to discredit you. I know. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Emma looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who'd walked into her life like a hurricane and torn apart everything that was hurting her. At the man who'd stood between her and a monster without flinching. At the man who'd just proven he'd burn the world down to keep her safe. Then I'm glad I won't be doing it alone, Emma said. Lucian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like armor. You're never doing anything alone again. Emma pressed her face against his chest and let herself believe him. The hospital was bright and sterile and too loud. Emma sat on an examination table while a doctor cleaned the cut on her lip and checked her for broken bones. Everything hurt, but nothing was fractured, just bruises, just trauma, just another chapter in a story that refused to end. Lucian stood by the door the entire time, refusing to leave even when the doctor suggested he wait outside. His suit was still torn, his face was still streaked with ash. He looked like he'd walked through hell. Maybe he had. When the doctor finally left them alone, Emma said, You don't have to stay. Yes, I do. Lucian, I'm not leaving you. His voice was firm, final. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not until you tell me to go. Emma's eyes burned. What if I never tell you to go? Lucien crossed the room and took her hands in his. Then I'll stay forever. The words should have terrified her, should have felt like another cage closing around her, but they didn't. They felt like safety. I need to tell you something, Emma said quietly. Okay. I think I'm falling in love with you. Lucien went very still. Emma, I know it's stupid. I know it's too fast. I know I probably have Stockholm Syndrome or some kind of trauma bond or... He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and raw and tasted like smoke and blood and everything they'd been through together. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. I love you, Lucian said. I've loved you since the moment you told Gavin you'd rather die than belong to him. Because that's when I realized you weren't broken. You were just waiting for a reason to fight back. Emma's tears finally spilled over. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be with someone without being afraid. Then we'll figure it out together. What if I can't? What if I'm too damaged? Lucian's hands came up to frame her face. You're not damaged. You're surviving. And that's the bravest thing I've ever seen. Emma closed her eyes and let herself lean into his touch. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was drowning. She felt like she might actually be learning how to swim. 3 days later, Emma woke up in Lucian's house to the sound of rain pounding against the windows. She'd been staying there since the hospital. Lucien had offered to take her back to her apartment, but she couldn't face it yet. Couldn't face the place where Gavin had found her, where he'd called her, where everything had started falling apart. So she'd stayed in Lucien's guest room, sleeping in borrowed clothes, trying to remember what normal felt like. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Emma grabbed it, her heart lurching. But it wasn't Gavin. It was a news alert. Prominent lawyer arrested on kidnapping and assault charges. Emma clicked the link with shaking hands. The article was brutal. It detailed Gavin's arrest, the evidence against him, the testimony from previous victims who'd finally come forward. His face was plastered across the screen. Not the charming lawyer everyone knew, but a man in handcuffs looking small and defeated. Emma stared at the photo for a long time. She'd spent 5 years being terrified of this man, and now he looked like nothing. A knock on the door pulled her attention. Come in, Emma called. Lucien entered carrying a cup of coffee. He was wearing dark jeans and a black sweater instead of his usual suit. It made him look younger, more human. You saw the news, he said. Yes. How do you feel? Emma set down her phone. I don't know. I thought I'd feel relieved, happy, something, but I just feel empty. Lucien sat on the edge of the bed. That's normal. How would you know? Because I felt the same way when my stepfather died. His ice blue eyes were steady on hers. You spend so long being afraid of someone that when they're finally gone, you don't know what to do with the space they left behind. Emma's throat tightened. What did you do? I learned how to fill it with better things. Like what? Like this. He gestured between them. Like people who actually deserve to be in your life. Like building something that matters instead of just surviving. Emma looked at him. Is that what you think I'm doing? Just surviving? I think you've been surviving for a long time, and now you get to figure out what living looks like. The words hit her harder than she expected, because he was right. She'd spent so long running, hiding, barely breathing, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to actually want something. I want to go back to my apartment, Emma said suddenly. Lucian frowned. Are you sure? No, but I need to see it. I need to prove to myself that I'm not afraid anymore. Okay. He stood. I'll drive you. Lucien, I'm not letting you go alone, Emma. Not yet. She wanted to argue, wanted to prove she could do this by herself. But the truth was, she didn't want to be alone. Not anymore. The apartment looked exactly the same. Same peeling paint, same creaky floorboards, same view of the hardware store across the street. But something felt different. Emma stood in the center of the tiny studio, looking around at the life she'd built from nothing. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and Gavin had tried to take it away. I hate this place, Emma said quietly. Lucien looked up from where he was checking the new locks he'd installed. Then move. Where? Anywhere you want. He crossed to stand beside her. You're not trapped anymore, Emma. You can go anywhere, do anything, be anyone. Emma's chest tightened. I don't know who I am without fear. Then let's find out together. She looked up at him. You really want that? To be with someone who's this much of a mess? You're not a mess. You're healing. Lucian's hand came up to cup her face. And I'd rather spend my life watching you heal than spend one more second pretending I don't need you. Emma's breath caught. You need me? Yes. Why? Because you make me want to be better than what I am. His voice was raw, honest. You make me believe that maybe I'm not just the sum of all the terrible things I've done. That maybe I can be something more. Tears burned Emma's eyes. Lucien, I love you, he said. And I know it's too soon. I know you're still healing. I know I'm probably the worst possible person for you to be with, but I love you anyway. Emma's hands fisted in his sweater. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Emma Holloway. She kissed him, and this time it didn't taste like desperation or fear or trauma. It tasted like hope. That night, Emma packed a bag. Not to run, not to hide, just to move forward. She was standing in the bathroom, throwing toiletries into a duffel, when her phone rang. Unknown number, her blood turned to ice. She answered. Hello? Ms. Holloway? An unfamiliar woman's voice. This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Pennsylvania State Police. I'm calling regarding Gavin Mercer's case. Emma's grip tightened on the phone. What about it? Mr. Mercer posted bail 3 hours ago. The world tilted. What? Emma's voice came out strangled. How? The judge set it at $2 million? His father paid it. The detective's voice was apologetic. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but legally, we can't hold him without trial. He's required to wear an ankle monitor and stay within county limits, but he's out. Emma's legs gave out. She slid down the bathroom wall until she was sitting on the cold tile floor. He's out, and you're just telling me this now? We tried to reach you immediately, but Emma hung up. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped the phone. It clattered across the tile. This couldn't be happening. After everything, after the warehouse, after Lucien had promised Gavin would be locked away, after she'd finally started believing she might actually be safe. He was out, walking free, probably planning his next move. Emma pressed her hands over her mouth to muffle the sob building in her chest. She'd been an idiot, had actually let herself believe that justice existed, that the system worked, that rich men with powerful fathers actually faced consequences. But they never did. They never did. Footsteps pounded up the stairs outside her apartment. Emma scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering. The door burst open. Lucian stood in the doorway, his phone in his hand, his face carved from stone. "You heard," Emma whispered. "I heard. He's out." "I know." "What do we do?" Lucien crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "We finish this." Emma's voice cracked. "How?" "By making sure he never gets the chance to hurt you again." The way he said it made Emma's blood run cold, because Lucien wasn't talking about lawsuits or evidence or playing by the rules anymore. He was talking about something far more permanent. "Lucien?" Emma pulled back to look at him. "What are you planning?" His ice blue eyes were completely empty. "Whatever it takes." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have." Emma's hands gripped his shirt. "Promise me you won't do anything that'll land you in prison. Promise me." Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I promise I'll keep you safe." It wasn't the promise she'd asked for, and they both knew it. Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in Lucien's guest bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like Gavin's silhouette. Her mind kept replaying the detective's words on an endless loop. "He's out. He's out. He's out." At 3 in the morning, she gave up trying. Emma pulled on a sweatshirt and padded downstairs. The house was dark except for a sliver of light coming from under Lucien's office door. She knocked softly. "Come in." Lucien sat behind his desk, still wearing the same clothes from earlier. His laptop was open, casting blue light across his face. Papers were spread across every surface. His jaw was tight. His eyes were bloodshot. "You're still awake," Emma said. "So are you." She crossed the room and looked at the papers. They were surveillance reports. Photos of Gavin leaving the courthouse. Maps of his father's estate where he was apparently staying. Phone records. Credit card statements. Lucien was building a profile. Hunting. "How long have you been doing this?" Emma asked quietly. "Since the call came in." "That was 8 hours ago." "I know." Emma sat on the edge of his desk. "You need to sleep. I need to find a way to put him back in prison." Lucien's voice was flat, exhausted. "Or failing that, I need to make sure he can't get anywhere near you." "And how do you plan to do that?" Lucien Cicho's ice blue eyes met hers. "I'm working on it." Emma could see it in his expression, the calculations happening behind his eyes, the line he was getting ready to cross. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't." Lucien leaned back in his chair. "You don't know what I'm thinking." "Yes, I do. You're thinking about making him disappear for real, not legally, not through the system, just gone." He didn't deny it. Emma's chest tightened. "Lucien, if you do that, you'll go to prison. And then what? I'll be safe, but you'll be locked away and I'll lose you." "You won't lose me." "Yes, I will. Because you'll be in a cell and I'll be out here alone, and Gavin will have won anyway because he'll have taken you away from me." Lucien stood and crossed to her. His hands came up to frame her face. "Emma, I need you to understand something. I've spent 15 years destroying men like your ex-husband. I know how they think. I know how they operate. And I know that if I don't stop Gavin permanently, he will find a way to hurt you. Maybe not today. Maybe not next week. But eventually. Then we'll deal with it when it happens. I can't take that risk. It's not your risk to take. It's mine." Lucien's jaw tightened. "No." "Yes." Emma's hands came up to cover his. "This is my life. My choice. And I'm choosing to fight him the right way. Through the courts. Through the law. Not through—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Through murder," Lucien said quietly. Emma flinched at the word. "That's what you think I'm planning," Lucien continued. "You think I'm going to kill him. Aren't you?" For a long moment, Lucien didn't answer. Then he said, "I don't know yet." The honesty in his voice was terrifying. "Lucien, I've killed before, Emma." His voice was completely flat. "Not directly, but I've made decisions that led to people dying. Business rivals who got too aggressive. Men who threatened people I cared about. I didn't pull the trigger, but I knew what would happen when I set certain things in motion." Emma's breath caught. "Are you trying to scare me away?" I'm trying to be honest. Then be honest about this. If you kill Gavin, you become exactly what he said you were. A monster. Just a different kind. Something flickered across Lucian's face. Pain, maybe. Or recognition. I'm already a monster, he said quietly. No, you're not. Emma, you saved me. Monsters don't do that. Lucien's hands dropped from her face. He turned away, his shoulders rigid with tension. I saved you because I wanted you. Because I'm selfish and possessive and every bit as controlling as Gavin, just in different ways. That's not true, isn't it? He spun back to face her. I've been manipulating your life since the moment we met. Installing security without asking, monitoring your phone, making decisions about your safety without consulting you. How is that different from what he did? Because you never hurt me. Emma's voice was steady, strong. Because every time I said no, you listened. Because you gave me choices instead of taking them away. Lucien looked at her like she'd just said something in a foreign language. I'm not afraid of you, Emma continued. I was at first, but I'm not anymore. Because I know the difference between someone who wants to control me and someone who wants to keep me safe. And you're the latter. You shouldn't trust me. Too late. Lucian's expression cracked. Emma, if I do this wrong, if I make the wrong call, then we deal with the consequences together. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. I'm asking you not to throw your life away for revenge. Emma stepped closer. I'm asking you to fight with me. Not for me. With me. Lucian's jaw worked. What if that's not enough? Then we'll figure something else out. But we do it the right way. The legal way. Because I didn't survive Gavin just to watch you destroy yourself. For the first time since she'd entered the office, Lucien looked uncertain, like he was standing on the edge of a cliff trying to decide whether to jump. Emma took his hand. Promise me. No vigilante justice. No making him disappear. We do this by the book. Lucien's fingers tightened around hers. The book doesn't always work for men like him. Then we rewrite the book. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. Okay? Okay? We do it your way. Legal, clean, by the book. His ice blue eyes were intense. But if he comes for you again, all bets are off. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Emma pulled him into her arms and held on tight. What? The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of her phone ringing. She grabbed it groggily. Hello? Miss Holloway, this is ADA Margaret Chen. I'm handling Gavin Mercer's prosecution. Emma sat up, suddenly wide awake. Okay. I need you to come to my office today. We need to go over your testimony for the preliminary hearing. When? 2:00. Emma glanced at the clock. It was already 11. I'll be there. She hung up and found Lucien standing in the doorway with coffee. The DA's office? He asked. How did you... I heard your phone ring. He handed her the cup. I'm coming with you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to prove she could face this alone, but the truth was she didn't want to. Okay, she said quietly. The DA's office was in a government building downtown that smelled like old carpet and desperation. Emma sat in a conference room across from ADA Margaret Chen, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Lucien sat beside Emma, silent but present. Thank you for coming in, Margaret said, opening a thick file. I want to be upfront with you, Ms. Holloway. This case is going to be difficult. Gavin Mercer comes from money and influence. His legal team is already filing motions to suppress evidence and discredit witnesses. Emma's stomach dropped. Can they do that? They can try. Whether they succeed depends on how strong our case is. Margaret looked at her directly. Which is where you come in. I need you to walk me through everything, every instance of abuse, every threat, every moment you felt unsafe, and I need you to be prepared to say it all again in court. Emma's hands clenched in her lap. Okay. I also need to warn you that his lawyers are going to come after you hard. They'll question your memory. They'll suggest you're lying for attention or money. They'll dig up every mistake you've ever made and use it to paint you as unreliable. I know. Do you? Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. Because I've seen victims fall apart on the stand when they realize what it's really like to be cross-examined by someone whose job is to destroy your credibility. Emma took a shaky breath. I can handle it. You'll have to, because if you break, we lose. Margaret pulled out a recorder. Now, let's start from the beginning. For the next 3 hours, Emma relived every awful moment. The first time Gavin grabbed her too hard. The first time he shoved her against a wall. The escalation from verbal abuse to physical violence. The broken ribs. The black eyes she'd covered with makeup. The fear that had become her constant companion. She told Margaret about running away. About changing her name. About the 6 months of looking over her shoulder waiting for him to find her. And then she told her about the warehouse. About Gavin slapping her. About the terror of being trapped again. By the time she finished, Emma was shaking. Margaret clicked off the recorder. That was good, strong, detailed. It didn't feel strong. It will in court. Margaret's expression softened slightly. I know this is hard, Ms. Holloway, but you're doing the right thing. Men like Gavin Mercer need to face consequences. He already posted bail. He's out there right now, with an ankle monitor and strict conditions. If he violates them even once, he goes back to jail immediately. Margaret stood. I'm going to do everything I can to put him away for a long time, but I need you to be strong. Can you do that? Emma looked at Lucien. He gave her the smallest nod. Yes, Emma said. I can do that. They were walking to Lucien's car when Emma's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her heart stopped. She answered. Hello? Emma? Gavin's voice was calm, too calm. We need to talk. Emma's blood turned to ice. You're violating the restraining order. I'm calling to negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate. Yes, there is. Gavin's voice dropped lower. Drop the charges. Tell the DA you made it all up, and I'll leave. Permanently. New city. New life. You'll never see me again. Emma's hands were shaking. I'm not dropping anything. Then you're making a mistake. You already made the mistake by calling me. Emma. She hung up. Her entire body was trembling. Lucien's hand came up to steady her. What did he say? Emma told him. Lucien's expression went deadly. He just violated his bail conditions. That call was illegal. So what do? We call the DA. Lucien pulled out his phone, and we make sure he goes back to jail. But before he could dial, Emma's phone rang again. This time it was Margaret Chen. Ms. Holloway, do not go home tonight. Emma's stomach dropped. Why? Gavin Mercer's ankle monitor went offline 20 minutes ago. He cut it off and ran. There's an active warrant for his arrest, but we don't know where he is. The world tilted. He called me, Emma whispered. Just now. He tried to get me to drop the charges. Margaret swore under her breath. That was the last mistake he's going to make. I'm issuing an arrest warrant for witness intimidation and bail jumping. Every cop in the state will be looking for him. What do I do? Stay somewhere safe, somewhere he doesn't know about, and whatever you do, do not engage with him if he tries to contact you again. Emma hung up and looked at Lucien. He's coming for me, she said. Lucien's jaw was tight. Let him try. They drove to Lucien's house in silence. Emma's mind was racing. Gavin had cut off his ankle monitor and run, which meant he was desperate, cornered, willing to do something stupid. Men were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. Lucien's house appeared through the trees. The gates opened automatically as they approached. We're safe here, Lucien said as they pulled into the driveway. Security is watching every entrance. If Gavin comes anywhere near this property, we'll know before he gets within 100 yards. Emma wanted to believe him, but she'd seen what desperation could do to a man like Gavin. They went inside. Lucien immediately disappeared into his office to coordinate with his security team. Emma stood in the living room, staring out at the darkening forest. Somewhere out there, Gavin was planning his next move, and Emma was done running. She pulled out her phone and opened a new message to Gavin's number. You want to talk? Fine. Meet me at Riverside Park. Midnight. Just you and me. No lawyers, no cops. We end this tonight. Her finger hovered over send. This was insane, reckless, exactly the kind of thing that could get her killed. But Emma was tired of being afraid, tired of letting Gavin control the narrative, tired of waiting for him to make the first move. If he wanted her, he could come get her, on her terms, in a public place, with Lucienne watching from the shadows. She hit send before she could talk herself out of it. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, midnight, come alone or I walk. Emma's heart hammered. She typed back, see you there? Then she went to find Lucien. He was in his office on a conference call when she walked in. He took one look at her face and immediately ended the call. What did you do? Emma told him. Lucien's expression went from shock to fury in half a second. Are you out of your mind? Probably. Emma, this is exactly what he wants, a chance to get you alone. I won't be alone. You'll be there. That's not the point. Yes, it is. Emma's voice was steady, strong. This is the only way to end it. He's desperate, cornered. If we wait for him to come to us, he'll choose the time and place. But if I control the meeting, if I force him to show up where and when I say, then we have the advantage. Or you'll get killed. Not if you're watching. Emma met his eyes. You said you'd keep me safe, so keep me safe while I do this. Lucien's jaw worked. She could see him fighting every protective instinct he had. Finally, he said, you wear a wire. You let me position men around the entire park. And the second things go sideways, I'm pulling you out. Deal. Emma, I'm doing this, Lucienne, with you or without you. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and started making calls. Riverside Park at midnight was exactly as Emma remembered. Dark, empty. The sound of the river rushing past in the darkness. She stood under a street lamp near the bench where she'd first seen Gavin after 6 months of freedom, the place where her nightmare had started all over again. Now it was where she'd end it. The wire taped to her chest felt heavy, foreign, but knowing Lucien could hear every word gave her courage. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Emma turned. Gavin emerged from the shadows. He looked terrible. His hair was messy. His expensive coat was wrinkled. His eyes had a wild, manic gleam that made Emma's skin crawl. You came, he said. You knew I would. Gavin stepped into the light. Where's your attack dog? Not here. Liar. Gavin's eyes scanned the darkness. He's watching. I can feel it. Emma didn't confirm or deny. Gavin laughed. It sounded unhinged. You really think this ends tonight? You really think you can just... What? Talk me into turning myself in? Apologize and make it all go away? No. Emma's voice was calm. I think you're going to prison for a long time, and I'm going to testify at your trial, and I'm going to watch you lose everything. Gavin's expression twisted. You destroyed my life. You destroyed your own life. I loved you. You beat me because you wouldn't listen. Gavin's voice rose. Because you kept pushing back, kept questioning, kept making everything harder than it had to be. So it was my fault. Yes. Emma felt something inside her snap. Not fear, not panic. Rage. Pure, white-hot rage. I was never the problem, Emma said, her voice shaking. You were. You're the one who couldn't handle a woman with her own opinions. You're the one who needed to control everything because you're so pathetic and insecure that the thought of me having any power terrified you. Gavin took a step forward. Watch your mouth. Or what? You'll hit me again? Emma didn't back down. Go ahead. Do it. Right here, in front of witnesses, with a wire recording every word. Give the DA everything they need to bury you. Gavin's hands clenched into fists. Emma saw the moment he snapped. Saw the calculation in his eyes disappear, saw the mask slip completely. Gavin lunged. Emma didn't run. She stood her ground, and the second Gavin's hand came up, 3 shadows detached from the darkness and slammed into him. Lucien's security team took him down in seconds. One grabbed his arms, another forced him to his knees. The third secured his wrists behind his back with zip ties. Gavin was screaming, cursing, thrashing, but he couldn't break free. Then Lucien stepped into the light. He looked at Gavin the way someone might look at a dead rat. You really are predictable, Lucien said quietly. Gavin's face contorted with rage. This was a setup. Yes. You can't. The police won't. The police are already on their way. Lucien pulled out his phone and played back audio. Gavin's voice screaming at Emma, the sound of him lunging at her, all of it crystal clear on the recording. Assault, attempted battery, violation of bail conditions, witness intimidation. That's at least another 10 years on top of the kidnapping charges. Gavin's face went white. Sirens wailed in the distance. Emma stood frozen, watching it all happen. This was it. The moment Gavin Mercer finally faced consequences. Blue and red lights flooded the park. Police cars screeched to a stop. Officers poured out with weapons drawn. "Gavin Mercer," one of them called. "You're under arrest." Lucien's men stepped back, hands raised. The police took over, forcing Gavin face down on the ground while they cuffed him. Emma watched as they read him his rights. Watched as they hauled him to his feet. Watched as they shoved him into the back of a cruiser. And for the first time in 5 years, she didn't feel afraid. She felt free. Lucien crossed to her side. His hand found hers. "It's over," he said quietly. Emma looked at him. "Is it?" "He's going to prison for a long time, and this time his father's money won't save him." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Lucien's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You did it, Emma. You won." Emma's eyes burned. "We won!" Lucien pulled her into his arms, and Emma finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she really was safe. 3 weeks later, Emma stood in a small bookstore on Main Street. It was empty except for paint cans and unopened boxes. But she could see what it would become. Exposed brick walls, warm lighting, shelves packed with books, a cozy reading nook by the window. Her bookstore, the one she'd dreamed about for years but never thought she'd actually own. Lucien had helped her secure the lease, had introduced her to contractors and designers, had never once tried to take over or control the process. He'd just supported her, stood beside her while she built something that was entirely hers. Emma ran her hand along the empty bookshelf. "What do you think?" Lucien's voice came from behind her. She turned. He was leaning against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, looking at her like she was the most extraordinary thing he'd ever seen. "I think it's perfect," Emma said. "Good." He crossed to her side. "Because I have something for you." He pulled a small envelope from his jacket. Emma took it with shaking hands. Inside was a single piece of paper, a deed, for the building, in her name. "Lucien," her voice cracked. "I can't accept this." "Yes, you can. It's too much. It's yours." His ice blue eyes were steady. "You've spent your entire life having things taken from you. I'm giving you something no one can ever take away." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. Lucien's hands came up to frame her face. "Emma Holloway, you are the strongest person I've ever met, and I love you, not because you need me, but because you don't." Emma's breath caught. "I want to spend the rest of my life watching you build the life you deserve," Lucien continued. "And if you'll let me, I want to be part of it." He dropped to one knee. Emma's heart stopped. Lucien pulled out a small black box and opened it. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, perfect. "Marry me," Lucien said, "not because you need protection, not because you're afraid, but because you choose me the same way I choose you, every day, for the rest of our lives." Emma couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, could only nod through the tears. Lucien stood and slid the ring onto her finger. Then he kissed her, and Emma kissed him back with everything she had. Because this wasn't a fairy tale. She wasn't a damsel. He wasn't a knight. They were just two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something better. Together. Outside, sunlight poured through the windows of the empty bookstore. And for the first time in her life, Emma Holloway wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. The engagement ring felt strange on Emma's finger. Not bad strange, just unfamiliar. Like her hand didn't quite know what to do with the weight of a promise that wasn't built on fear. She twisted it absently while standing in the empty bookstore, watching Lucien talk on his phone near the window. He was coordinating something with his lawyers, probably related to Gavin's upcoming trial. His voice was calm, controlled, the the same way it always was when he was handling business. But Emma could see the tension in his shoulders. The trial was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks until she'd have to stand in front of a courtroom and relive every terrible moment. 3 weeks until Gavin's lawyers would try to tear her apart on the witness stand. 3 weeks until a jury would decide whether her truth was enough. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from ADA Margaret Chen. Need you to come in tomorrow. Defense filed new motions. We need to prep. Emma's stomach twisted. She texted back, "What kind of motions?" The response came immediately. "The kind designed to make you look unstable. We'll discuss tomorrow." Emma set down her phone with shaking hands. Lucien ended his call and crossed to her. "What's wrong?" "The defense is filing motions. Margaret says they're trying to discredit me." Lucien's jaw tightened. "Expected. Gavin's lawyers know their case is weak, so they'll attack your credibility instead." "What if it works?" "It won't. You don't know that." Lucien took her hand gently. "Emma, you've survived worse than a cross-examination. You'll survive this too." Emma wanted to believe him, but she'd seen what lawyers could do, how they could twist words and weaponize trauma and make victims sound like liars. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Good." Lucien's ice-blue eyes were steady. "Fear means you understand what's at stake, but don't let it paralyze you. What if I freeze on the stand? What if I can't get the words out? Then you take a breath. You look at me in the gallery, and you remember that you're not that terrified woman anymore." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You're the woman who looked Gavin in the eye and told him he'd lost. You're the woman who built a new life from nothing. You're the woman who survived." Emma's eyes burned. Lucien pulled her close. "And no matter what happens in that courtroom, I'll be right there. Every single second." Emma pressed her face against his chest and tried to believe it would be enough. The next morning, Emma sat in Margaret Chen's office while the ADA laid out the defense's strategy. "They're arguing you have a history of mental instability," Margaret said, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. "They've subpoenaed your medical records from the marriage, every doctor's visit, every prescription, every ER trip." Emma's blood ran cold. "They can do that." "Unfortunately, yes. And they're going to use it to paint a picture of someone who was depressed, anxious, and possibly delusional." "I was depressed and anxious because he was beating me." "I know that, you know that, but the defense will argue that your mental state makes you an unreliable witness." Margaret's expression was grim. "They're also bringing in a psychologist who will testify that victims of domestic violence often misremember events or exaggerate details due to trauma." Emma felt sick. "So they're saying I'm lying. They're saying you believe you're telling the truth, but your perception is distorted." Margaret leaned forward. "Which is why we need to be prepared. Every question they ask will be designed to make you doubt yourself, to make the jury doubt you." "How do I fight that?" "By staying calm, by sticking to the facts, by not letting them provoke you into an emotional reaction." Margaret's voice softened slightly. "I know it's going to be hard, but you're stronger than they think." Emma's hands clenched in her lap. "What if it's not enough?" "Then we lean on the physical evidence, the recordings, the witness testimony, the financial crimes." Margaret tapped the files on her desk. "Gavin Mercer made a lot of mistakes. We just need to make sure the jury sees them." Emma nodded, but her chest felt tight. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to prepare for the fight of her life. The days blurred together. Emma spent mornings at the bookstore, painting walls and assembling shelves. Afternoons were devoted to trial prep with Margaret. Evenings were spent with Lucien, Ryan, trying to pretend everything was normal, even though they both knew it wasn't. At night, Emma dreamed about the courtroom, about standing on the witness stand while Gavin's lawyer shouted questions, about freezing, about forgetting her own story, about the jury looking at her with doubt in their eyes. She woke up gasping more than once, and every time Lucien was there, holding her, grounding her, reminding her she wasn't alone. 2 weeks before the trial, Emma's parents called. She'd been avoiding them since leaving Gavin. They'd loved him, had believed his charm, had suggested more than once that Emma was overreacting when she'd tried to tell them the truth. But now they'd seen the news coverage. "Emma, sweetheart," her mother's voice was thick with emotion. "We didn't know. We had no idea it was that bad. Emma's throat tightened. I tried to tell you. I know, and I'm so sorry. Her mother was crying now. We should have listened. We should have believed you. Why didn't you? The silence stretched. Finally, her father spoke. Because Gavin was charming, successful, the kind of son-in-law we'd always hoped for. And we didn't want to believe that someone who looked so perfect could be hiding something so ugly. Emma's eyes burned. You chose him over me. We made a terrible mistake. Her father's voice cracked. And we'll spend the rest of our lives trying to make it up to you. Emma wanted to be angry, wanted to tell them it was too late, that their apology didn't erase 5 years of being ignored and dismissed, but she was too tired for anger. I need time, Emma said quietly. We understand. Her mother's voice was small. We just wanted you to know we're here, and we love you, and we're so, so sorry. Emma hung up and sat in silence for a long time. Lucien found her on the couch, staring at nothing. Your parents? He asked. She nodded. He sat beside her and waited. They apologized, Emma said finally. Said they didn't know how bad it was, that they should have believed me. Do you believe them? I don't know. Emma's voice was hollow. Part of me wants to forgive them, but part of me is still so angry that they made me feel crazy for wanting to leave. Lucien's hand found hers. You don't have to decide right now. Healing doesn't have a timeline. Emma looked at him. How do you always know what to say? I don't. I just know what I would have wanted someone to say to me when I was 17, and no one believed my mother was being hurt. Emma's chest tightened. Did you ever forgive them? The people who didn't help her? No. Lucien's voice was flat. But I learned to accept that most people are more comfortable with comfortable lies than uncomfortable truths. Emma squeezed his hand. They sat together in silence until the sun went down. Packed. 1 week before the trial, Gavin's father showed up at the bookstore. Emma was alone, organizing boxes of books, when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up. Richard Mercer stood in the doorway. Tall, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than Emma's entire wardrobe. He looked exactly like an older version of Gavin. Same arrogant set to his jaw, same cold eyes. Emma's heart started hammering. You need to leave. I just want to talk. Richard's voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of a man used to getting what he wanted. 5 minutes. I'm calling the police. Please, just hear me out. Emma's hand closed around her phone. You have 60 seconds. Richard stepped inside and closed the door behind him. My son made mistakes. I'm not denying that, but destroying his entire life isn't going to fix what happened between you two. Emma's blood boiled. He kidnapped me. He assaulted me. He stalked me across state lines. Those aren't mistakes. They're crimes. He was in love with you. He acted irrationally. He beat me for 5 years. Richard's expression didn't change. Relationships are complicated. Get out. Ms. Holloway, I'm prepared to offer you a settlement, $5 million. In exchange, you drop the charges and sign an NDA. Emma stared at him. You think you can buy me off? I think everyone has a price. Richard pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is a good faith payment, $100,000, cash. Consider it a down payment on your silence. Emma's hands shook with rage. Your son belongs in prison. My son belongs in therapy, not a cell. Richard's voice hardened. And if you insist on pursuing this vendetta, I will make sure your life becomes very difficult. I have resources, connections. I can make problems appear that you won't be able to solve. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a way out that benefits everyone. The door behind Richard opened. Lucien stepped inside. He looked at Richard Mercer the way a wolf might look at a rabbit. You're trespassing, Lucien said quietly. Richard turned. His expression shifted from confidence to something closer to wariness. Mr. Vale, I was just leaving. Lucien's voice was ice. Before I call the police and have you arrested for witness intimidation. I was simply trying to have a conversation. You were trying to bribe and threaten the woman who's going to put your son in prison. Lucien stepped closer. Let me be very clear, Mr. Mercer. If you or anyone associated with you comes near Emma again, I will destroy you, not your son. You. I'll start with the real estate fraud you've been committing for the past decade. Then I'll move on to the tax evasion. Then the bribes you paid to get building permits. And I'll keep going until there's nothing left. Richard's face went pale. You're bluffing. Try me. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Richard straightened his tie and headed for the door. He paused on the threshold. You're making a mistake, Ms. Holloway. Both of you. The only mistake I made was not fighting back sooner, Emma said. Richard left. Emma's legs gave out. She grabbed the counter to steady herself. Lucien was beside her in a second, his hands on her shoulders. Are you okay? No. Emma's voice shook. He tried to buy me off, like I'm something that can be purchased. Men like him think everything has a price. Lucien's jaw was tight. But he just made a critical mistake. What? He committed a felony in front of a witness. Witness tampering. Attempted bribery. I recorded the entire conversation. Lucien pulled out his phone. By tomorrow morning, the DA will have this recording, and Richard Mercer will be under investigation. Emma stared at him. You recorded it? I've been recording everything since Gavin made bail, just in case. His ice blue eyes were intense. I told you I'd keep you safe. I meant it. Emma's eyes burned. She pulled Lucien close and held on tight. 3 more days, Lucien murmured against her hair. 3 more days and this all ends. Emma prayed he was right. The courthouse was packed. Emma sat in the witness waiting room, her hands clenched in her lap, listening to muffled voices through the walls. The trial had been going on for 2 days. Expert witnesses, character witnesses, police testimony, financial forensics. Now it was her turn. Ms. Holloway? A bailiff appeared in the doorway. They're ready for you. Emma stood on shaking legs. Lucien squeezed her hand one last time. You've got this. Emma nodded and followed the bailiff into the courtroom. The space was smaller than she'd expected. Wood paneling, rows of benches packed with people, a jury box filled with 12 strangers who held her future in their hands. And sitting at the defense table, flanked by expensive lawyers, was Gavin. He looked smaller than she remembered, paler. His expensive suit couldn't hide the hollowness in his eyes or the way his hands trembled slightly on the table. He looked like what he was, a man who'd lost everything. Emma walked to the witness stand and was sworn in. A DA? Margaret Chen stood. Ms. Holloway, thank you for being here today. I know this isn't easy. Emma's voice came out steadier than she felt. I'm ready. Can you tell the court how you met Gavin Mercer? Emma took a breath and began. She told them about the charming lawyer who'd swept her off her feet, about the whirlwind romance, about how the first cracks had appeared after the wedding. Small things at first, controlling what she wore, who she saw, where she went. She told them about the first time he'd grabbed her hard enough to bruise, how he'd cried and apologized and promised it would never happen again. She told them about the escalation, the shoves, the slaps, the punches, the broken ribs that he'd convinced her to lie about at the hospital. She told them about the terror of living with someone who could switch from loving to violent in the space of a heartbeat. And she told them about running, about 6 months of freedom, about the moment Gavin had found her again. By the time she finished, several jurors were crying. Margaret sat down. The defense attorney stood. His name was Gerald Walsh, and he looked exactly like every privileged man Emma had ever met. Silver hair, expensive suit, expression that suggested he thought he was the smartest person in the room. Ms. Holloway, Walsh began, you've painted quite a picture of my client. Very emotional, very sympathetic. Emma's hands clenched. It's the truth, is it? Or is it your perception of the truth colored by mental health struggles? Walsh pulled out a file. According to medical records from your marriage, you were prescribed antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. You were hospitalized twice for panic attacks. You saw a therapist who diagnosed you with severe depression and PTSD. Because your client was abusing me. Or because you were struggling with pre-existing mental health issues that made you interpret normal marital disagreements as abuse. Walsh's voice was smooth, condescending. Isn't it true that you have a history of anxiety and depression dating back to adolescence? Yes, but isn't it also true that you've experienced memory problems related to your anxiety? Emma's chest tightened. Sometimes I had trouble remembering details when I was having panic attacks, but I remember everything Gavin did to me. Do you? Walsh stepped closer. Or do you remember your emotional reaction and filled in the details later? Objection, Margaret called. Badgering the witness. Sustained, the judge said. Mr. Walsh, ask questions. Don't make speeches. Walsh didn't miss a beat. Miss Holloway, isn't it true that you never called the police during your marriage? I was afraid. Yes or no? No, I didn't call them. And you never told your parents the full extent of what was allegedly happening? Because they didn't believe me when I tried. Yes or no, Ms. Holloway? Emma's jaw clenched. No. And you never sought a restraining order until after you'd already fled the state and changed your name? Because I knew he'd find me. Yes or no? No. Walsh nodded slowly. So, to summarize, you never reported the abuse to police, never told your family, never sought legal protection while you were still in the marriage, and now you expect this jury to believe that my client, a respected attorney with no prior criminal record, suddenly became this monster you've described? Emma's hands were shaking. Yes, because that's what happened. Or, Walsh's voice was sharp now. You're a woman with documented mental health issues who has constructed a narrative to justify abandoning a marriage that didn't live up to your expectations. Objection! Margaret was on her feet. Withdrawn! Walsh turned away. No further questions. Emma sat frozen on the stand. The judge nodded to Margaret. Redirect? Margaret stood. Ms. Holloway, why didn't you call the police during your marriage? Emma's voice was raw. Because Gavin was a lawyer. He knew how to work the system. He told me repeatedly that if I went to the police, he'd make sure I looked crazy, that he'd use my anxiety and depression against me, that no one would believe me. And was he right? Yes. For a long time he was. Emma looked directly at the jury. But I'm not letting him be right anymore. Margaret nodded. No further questions, Your Honor. Emma stepped down from the witness stand on shaking legs. She made it halfway to the gallery before her knees gave out. Lucien caught her before she fell. He guided her to a seat in the front row and held her hand through the rest of the trial. The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of second-guessing every word she'd said on the stand. 3 days of wondering if it had been enough. Emma spent the time finishing the bookstore, painting the last wall, shelving the last book, building something beautiful out of the wreckage. Lucien was with her every second. On the afternoon of the third day, Emma's phone rang. Margaret Chen. The jury's back, verdict in 1 hour. Emma's heart stopped. Okay. She hung up and looked at Lucien. It's time, she said. The courtroom was silent as the jury filed in. Emma sat in the front row, Lucien beside her, watching 12 strangers take their seats. None of them looked at Gavin. That was a good sign, Margaret had said. Jurors who'd voted to convict often couldn't look at the defendant. Emma held on to that knowledge like a lifeline. The judge entered. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. Emma's breath caught. On the charge of assault and battery, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of violating a restraining order, how do you find? Guilty. The judge continued reading through all 14 charges. Guilty. 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 Every single one. Emma couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only sit frozen while the judge thanked the jury and set a sentencing date for 2 weeks from now. The bailiffs came forward to take Gavin into custody. He looked at Emma one last time. She stared back without flinching, and for the first time in 5 years she saw fear in his eyes. Good. Let him be afraid for once. Let him know what it feels like to be powerless. They led him away in handcuffs, and Emma finally let herself cry. Lucien pulled her close, and she sobbed against his chest while the courtroom emptied around them. "It's over," Lucien murmured. "It's really over." Emma nodded, unable to speak. But he was wrong. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. Bods. 2 weeks later, Emma stood in the courtroom for the sentencing hearing. Gavin's lawyers had filed for leniency. His father had submitted character references from business partners and old friends. A psychologist had testified that Gavin was a good candidate for rehabilitation. But Emma had also submitted her victim impact statement, and she'd meant every word. The judge looked at Gavin. "Mr. Mercer, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" Gavin stood. He looked thinner, broken. "I'm sorry." His voice cracked. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry for everything I did. To Emma, to the other women, to everyone I hurt." Emma felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just emptiness. The judge's expression was stone. "Mr. Mercer, you are a lawyer. You knew the law, and you chose to break it repeatedly. You used your education and resources to terrorize women who trusted you, and when one of them finally escaped, you stalked her across state lines and attempted to reclaim her through violence." Gavin's shoulders slumped. "I've read Ms. Holloway's victim impact statement," the judge continued. "I've read the statements from 3 other women, and I've reviewed the evidence of your financial crimes and your family's attempts to obstruct justice." The courtroom was silent. "On all charges, I sentence you to 15 years in state prison without the possibility of parole for the first 7 years. You will also be required to pay restitution to all victims and complete a certified batterer intervention program." Gavin's face crumpled. His father, sitting in the back row, stood and walked out. The bailiffs led Gavin away. And Emma finally felt like she could breathe. 6 months later, the bookstore opened. It was called Holloway Books, and the sign above the door was hand-painted in gold letters that caught the morning light. Emma stood outside on opening day, staring at her name on the building, trying to process that this was real. She owned something, had built something, had created a space that was entirely hers, and no one could take it away. "You ready?" Lucien appeared beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. Emma took one. "I think so. You've been saying that for a week." "Because it's terrifying." Emma laughed shakily. "What if no one comes? What if everyone thinks it's stupid? What if it's exactly what this town needs?" Lucien's voice was gentle. "What if you've created something beautiful and people love it?" Emma looked at him. "When did you become an optimist?" "The moment I met you." Her eyes burned. Lucien leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You've got this. Now go open your bookstore." Emma took a breath and unlocked the door. By noon, the store was packed. People browsed the shelves. Kids sprawled in the reading nook. The smell of coffee from the small cafe counter filled the air. Emma moved through the space, answering questions and making recommendations, and it felt like coming home. This was what surviving looked like. Not just breathing, not just existing, actually living, building something from the ashes, creating beauty out of pain. Late in the afternoon, an older woman approached the counter. "Are you Emma Holloway?" "Yes." "I saw the news coverage of your trial. I just wanted to say thank you." The woman's eyes were wet. "My daughter is in a situation like yours was, and seeing you fight back gave her the courage to leave. She's safe now because of you." Emma's throat closed up. "I'm glad she's safe." "She asked me to give you this." The woman handed Emma an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "Thank you for being brave enough to testify. You saved my life without even knowing it." Emma read it 3 times before she could speak. "Tell her she's welcome," Emma finally managed, "and tell her it gets better." The woman nodded and left. Emma stood behind the counter, holding the note, tears streaming down her face. Lucien appeared at her side. "You okay?" Emma nodded. "I'm more than okay. I think I'm actually happy." Lucien smiled, the real kind, the one that made him look younger and less dangerous and entirely human. "Good. You deserve to be happy." Emma looked around the bookstore she'd built, at the people filling the space, at the life she'd created from nothing. "I want to help them," she said suddenly. "Help who?" "Other women like me. Women who are trying to leave. who don't know where to start or who to trust. Emma turned to face him. I want to use part of the bookstore as a resource center. Information about shelters, legal aid, therapy, a safe space where they can figure out their next step. Lucian's expression softened. That's a beautiful idea. Will you help me? Always. Emma kissed him. And standing in the middle of her bookstore, surrounded by everything she'd fought for, Emma Holloway finally understood what freedom felt like. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of choice. The knowledge that she could fall and get back up, that she could trust and be trusted, that she could love and be loved without losing herself in the process. 1 year later, Emma stood in front of a mirror in a simple white dress. It wasn't a wedding gown, just a dress, because this wedding wasn't about spectacle or performance. It was about two people choosing each other. Her mother knocked on the door. Emma, you ready? Emma turned. Her parents had been working hard to rebuild their relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest now, real. I'm ready. Her father appeared behind her mother, his eyes wet. You look beautiful, sweetheart. Emma hugged them both. Then she walked downstairs. The ceremony was small, just close friends in Lucian's living room. No fancy venue, no hundreds of guests, just the people who mattered. Lucian waited at the front wearing a simple black suit, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Emma walked to him and took his hands. The officiant began, but Emma barely heard the words. She was too focused on Lucien's face, on the way his ice-blue eyes had gone soft, on the slight tremor in his hands. He was nervous. Lucien Vale, who faced down criminals and destroyed empires, was nervous about marrying her. It made her love him even more. Do you, Emma Holloway, take this man to be your husband? Emma looked at Lucian, at the man who'd stood between her and a monster without flinching, who'd held her through nightmares, who'd supported her dreams without trying to control them. I do. And do you, Lucien Vale, take this woman to be your wife? Lucien's voice was steady, strong. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss. Lucien pulled Emma close and kissed her, and Emma kissed him back with everything she had. Because this wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a beginning, a choice to build something together, to face whatever came next side by side. 2 years after that, Emma sat in the back room of Holloway Books, looking at the woman across from her. Her name was Sarah. She was 26, and she had bruises on her wrists that she kept trying to hide. I don't know where to start, Sarah whispered. Emma handed her a folder. Start here. This has information about shelters, legal aid, therapists who specialize in trauma. Everything you need to take the first step. What if he finds me? Then you call this number. Emma wrote down Lucian's private line. My husband has resources. He'll make sure you're protected. Sarah's hands shook as she took the folder. Why are you helping me? Because someone helped me once, and because you deserve better than what he's giving you. Sarah started crying. Emma moved around the desk and pulled her into a hug. You're not alone, Emma said quietly. You're never alone. Not anymore. Bye. 5 years after leaving Gavin, Emma stood in the bookstore at closing time. She'd just finished a reading for her first published book, a memoir about surviving domestic violence and rebuilding a life from the wreckage. The audience had been packed. The Q&A had run long, and Emma had signed copies until her hand cramped. Now the store was quiet. Lucien appeared in the doorway. How'd it go? Better than I expected. Emma smiled. 3 women came up afterward and asked about resources for leaving abusive partners. I gave them all folders. You're changing lives. I'm just sharing what I learned. Lucian crossed to her and pulled her close. You're extraordinary. You know that, right? Emma rested her head against his chest. I'm just surviving. No. Lucian's voice was firm. You're thriving. There's a difference. Emma closed her eyes and listened to his heartbeat. He was right. She was thriving, had built a business, had written a book, had helped dozens of women escape situations like hers, had married a man who loved her without trying to cage her, had learned what it meant to be happy. Thank you, Emma said quietly. For what? For saving me. Lucian pulled back to look at her. I didn't save you, Emma. You saved yourself. I just stood beside you while you did it. Emma's eyes burned, because he was right about that too. She'd saved herself, had chosen to fight back instead of staying trapped, had chosen to testify instead of staying silent, had chosen to build instead of hiding. And every day she kept choosing to heal, to grow, to live, not just exist, not just survive, actually live. Outside, the sun was setting over Main Street. Golden light poured through the windows of Holloway Books, washing everything in warmth. Emma took Lucian's hand and locked the door behind them, and together they walked toward whatever came next. Because the truth about surviving monsters wasn't that you defeated them and lived happily ever after. It was that you learned to carry the scars, to honor them without being defined by them, to build something beautiful despite them. Emma Holloway had spent 5 years being afraid, and then she'd spent 5 more learning how to be free. It hadn't been easy, it hadn't been perfect, but it had been worth it, every single second. Because on the other side of terror was a life she'd built with her own hands, a life that belonged entirely to her. And no one, not Gavin, not fear, not the past, could ever take that away. She was finally, completely, irrevocably free, and she'd never felt more alive.